This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
D&D Beyond had a little bit of a whoopsie.
Ooh.
I wish James was here to answer this question.
Should we be offended?
DriveThruRPG have introduced AI filtering tools.
I am not against get rid of generative AI.
Critical Role and Dimension 20 both going on tour. Has anybody been watching Legends of Vox Machina?
I have been hearing certain things that had me very bewildered.
I think the word mainstream can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Having something up on Netflix does not make it mainstream.
We're potentially beyond the last generation of true quote-unquote celebrity.
Ravenloft, Heir of Strahd.
Question. When was the last time you read a novel?
I'm well read. I'm not well reading.
All of that and more right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the number one tabletop RPG and video game podcast in all the realms this week, because I've got an itch that needs scratching, and that itch is talking about Dragon Age, the Veilguard, but nobody else has played it yet, so that itch is probably not going to get scratched. Instead, I'm Ben Byrne, by the way, joined as always by Shawn Merwin at Dael Kingsmill, James Hake away on assignment this week, and Shawn, I'm going to ask you first, has there ever been a video game that you've played that you've thought this would make a great RPG from a mechanical point of view first, not necessarily the IP?
So many games that I've played have been based on RPGs to start with that it's sort of vice versa. But one thing that I have tried to pick up from video games is not necessarily the gameplay mechanics, but the storytelling mechanics. Okay. Because video games did a great job, I think, of taking a story and making it interactive, but also limited in a way that game masters can learn from. So things like gated quests or main quests and then side quests that dry up and are unattainable if you reach a certain point. I think game masters can learn from that form of storytelling in their RPG games.
I actually have 2 whole separate videos where the entire premise is stuff I stole from video games and adapted to put in my tabletop RPG. And this is, I don't know that it's necessarily like my favorite of all of them, but the idea that started it, I'm going to tell you this one because it's the stupidest one. The idea that started it all was I was playing Animal Crossing New Horizons. And there are all these little like bonuses you get if you do things like speak to 5 villagers each day. Every time you go to this shopkeeper, you get a little, and it just increases your sort of friendship stats behind the scenes and whatever. I was like, isn't that kind of cool? Isn't it nice, the idea of like the DM behind the screen, just keeping track of like, how many times did you talk to this specific shopkeeper? Now you get a 5% discount. Or like, you killed this many of this specific faction baddie or something, I don't know, and so you get some little thing, some little reward, and it's not necessarily player facing, it's not necessarily telling them if you do this number of times, like a Starbucks card, but just a little thing to track, to just go, hey, they did that many times, let's reflect that story element with a little treat. That led to 2 whole videos. I even forgot to mention that specific one in the first video, that's why I had to make another one.
Well, you got two weeks worth of YouTube content out of it, so can't complain. Yeah. I'm increasingly appreciating like dungeon/puzzle design. I think what video games do very well, unless they're kind of an intentional puzzle video game, in which case they'll tend to hide the solution to a puzzle from you a little bit more. But video games are generally good, and different people might have different opinions on this, of presenting a puzzle that is extremely simple to solve, but makes you feel like you're solving something interesting. And it's fun to kind of engage in, and it feels like an encounter that you've had and a challenge that you've overcome in solving this puzzle. But it's not something that's going to trap you there for, hours and hours and stop the story progressing, especially because in a video game context, you can just go online and look up a guide if you really need to. But the point being that in terms of just finding engaging ways to encourage exploration. At the moment, I'll give you a very simple example that I'm thinking of maybe trying to throw into a dungeon somewhere. In Dragon Age, the Veilguard at the moment, there are like doors that have a lock on them that's like a crystal, and you break the crystal and the like force field disappears. But then you can have crystals that like put auras onto other crystals, protecting them. So you have to break the one of the crystals first before you can break the second one, if that makes sense. And then they start networking them together, and then you've got to go find like where they're hidden to be able to break them all to then ultimately unlock the door. And I think what I like about that is that it encourages players to go and explore the other rooms. You know, you can't get through here yet, but there are other paths for you to go and explore before you come back and are then able to get through here because you've accomplished X thing. And I think that's good dungeon design in the way that it is a little bit it's a little bit railroady in that there is like ultimately you have to go through this door, but it feels more open and exploration-y because it encourages players to go and explore other areas. So the GM knows that they're going to go through X door at a certain point, so they can prep for that, but also know that they're going to have to go and possibly do one or two of these other things before they can go through that door. Sorry, Shawn.
My second point that I was going to add, if I had time, was expanding areas as you gain more power. And it's exactly what you said. You go through the dungeon the first time and you can't get through this door because you don't have the thing. And it's not just good adventure design, but it's good storytelling because you get to reuse certain things and you get to show things in a different light, which is generally good for readers and viewers and players to have knowledge that then expands as their character gains the powers that expand what they can do. So I love that design.
Tomb of Annihilation does this, has like a version of this that I think is kind of cool. Spoilers for Tomb of Annihilation, mildly for people. I never got into the titular tomb because for me, Omu is the ancient city where campaigns go to die. But they have like skeleton keys that you have to collect from different rooms to be able to open like a specific door, I think. But those keys are literally skeletons with a key on their head that like run around the dungeon and you've got to catch them. And I never got to play it out, but I just love that idea of like a moving thing that the party had, like a what was it called? In Quidditch, the ball that, pardon me, flies around and you got to go catch it.
The snitch,
the snitch?
Yeah, the snitch. There you go. You know what I mean. Just have something that the players have to like work for, and they might get it on the first try, but they might not. So then they have to go to another area of the dungeon and try again in a different context. And if they get it there, all the power to them. And if they don't, then they have a third attempt, and it kind of forces them to move around and see more of the dungeon than they might necessarily if they were just trying to mainline. Who here, I wish James was here to answer this question. Who here owns
Should we be offended?
No. I just wanted all three of you to answer. Shawn, do you or don't you? It's a binary, really.
There are a lot in my home. I would not call myself the owner of them.
Okay, all right. That's good to know. Dael, can I spy one literally over your shoulder right now, or is that something else?
Are you talking about my Big Ears egg cup?
Yeah, that one.
Big Ears from Nutty? No. This is an egg cup from the 60s. I do admire your confusion, and it's got this. So you're welcome.
Oh.
Do you own a Funko Pop that's not in frame?
I had one for a while that my friend gave me that was a Red Power Ranger that I liked fine, but I'm not like a huge Funko Pop person. So when I moved, it didn't make it down. I don't think that friend watches this podcast, so I think I'm okay.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. I have never owned one proudly because I used to work at EB Games, which sell them. Like they have a whole wall dedicated to them. The closest I ever came was getting The Witcher, like Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri all came out at one point. But anyway, there was something in the news about D&D are releasing a bunch of new Funko Pops, but it's not really news because they do it all the time. There's been like 20 waves of D&D Funko Pops. Get a Lady of Pain, but her head's 5 times the size of her body. You can get it now. Anyway, moving on. Also in the news, D&D Beyond had a little bit of a whoopsie, a little bit of a slip up, where they accidentally published almost the entirety, to my understanding, of the Dungeon Master's Guide into the free rules section of D&D Beyond, the sort of introductory rules section of D&D Beyond. Were either of you quick enough to see this happening in action?
I use D&D Beyond all the time. So I went look, I can get to this and this and this. Is it because I bought the book? No, I shouldn't have it yet. What? Oh,
wow.
I went out to all my game design friends. I'm like, can you all see that? And they're like, yeah, the whole book's up there almost. Wow. It's gone.
There was a whoopsie where they published the DM's Toolbox, which we talked a little bit about 2 episodes ago with Latia. The Cosmology section, the Treasure section was up there apparently. The Lore Glossary, all posted to the free rules for everyone to access. However, if you're listening to this, it is already gone. A changelog dated October 30th noted the additional content was posted up in error and has now been stripped down to just the poisons and traps. The changelog emphasizing that the free rules section is only intended as an introductory and not a substitute for the core books.
I think poisons and traps is pretty good to leave there.
Remember before we had news that some people who had ordered the bundle with the digital and the hard copy of the book had a problem with their payment, so their thing got canceled? That happened to me with the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Ooh.
I don't know what to do. I'm lost. How can a game design? Oh, I have it online. Never mind. But it was just sort of odd that they didn't get that straightened out, unless one of you stole my credit card, which, Dante, you were here. Did you steal my credit card?
Dante! Yeah, that's interesting. You're right. That is interesting that is still happening. I have no doubt that we're going to hear a lot of angry Reddit posts about that next week. So when does the DMG, when is it? It's early access at the moment for people who have the master tier subscription. That's why it seemed to go live to the free rules, is because it that early access period started for folks. When does it go live to everybody?
I thought it was the 17th, but I may be wrong. It was a couple of weeks into November, I think.
Roman's saying 7 days from now in chat.
The 11th. Close enough. What's a week between trends?
Yeah, I suspect after that period comes and goes, we might see a lot of more upset people then if payments are not being accepted, unfortunately. But you know what is fortunate? DriveThruRPG have introduced AI filtering tools into their browsing functions on their website. DriveThruRPG, if you're not already in the know, is an online store for RPG products, predominantly PDFs, but they also do print on demand. Lots of third-party publishers use it, but there are also, I believe, like older editions of D&D and stuff up on DriveThruRPG. So lots of RPG content up there. It's a free publishing tool as well. Like anybody can use it. I've got content from before I was working at Ghostfire up there. Shawn, I believe you'd have a lot of things up there. Dael, I know you've got stuff up there on DriveThruRPG. So it's a great place for people who want to break into the industry. I think we've given this advice on the Lorecast before, that people who want to try to become writers or publishers in their own right, DriveThruRPG is an avenue to be able to get your content in front of people. But that it has, in more recent times, invited a lot of folks to start publishing content that includes the aid of generative AI tools, both in an art sense, because one of the hardest things for a writer to be able to get into their published piece of work is artwork that supports it, but also from a writing standpoint as well. So the website now empowers you as the user to filter between what it is calling handcrafted content, which has no use of AI tools whatsoever, contains AI-generated content, which is self-explanatory, or creation method not chosen by publisher, for folks who I suppose don't mention when they're filling out their back-end forms to publish something on DriveThruRPG whether there's AI content in it or not, which I think that last one's important, so that people aren't trying to just like slip in under the gate, so to speak.
Yeah, it means that now they have to actively be lying if they want to break that rule, which, you know, some people it's not going to stop them, but for a lot of people it's probably more born out of laziness than maliciousness, and so being able to kind of very specifically say, I only want stuff that a person made with their brain, is really handy dandy. Yeah, when I first read this, when I first read AI filter search, I thought it meant a filter that was run using AI. I was really worried, because not only does that just feel bad, but also, you know, when you're dealing with like an AI help chat bot and it's just a nightmare because it never understands what you're talking about. That's what I was imagining. So I was really pleased that this is what it meant.
Yeah, I'm really interested in knowing how many people are going to search based on this. Because one of the big questions of any creator in any field, but us specifically, is, do people really care? We know that some people care, but what percentage care? And something like this will be able to at least start to quantify how many people are searching only for handcrafted things.
Well, I'm kind of interested because, okay, this is a weird parallel to draw, but I have been drawing it in my mind. So there is probably the current predominant fan fiction website on the internet is known for its really exceptionally good filtering system, right? And this kind of mirrors it in a little sense where it's when you're searching for fan fiction on this website, a lot of the time you're going to engage with those filters not because you really specifically are looking for the fan fiction equivalent of a handcrafted thing, but because you want to filter out something that is bugging you. You're looking at all these results, and if you keep getting AI content in your DriveThruRPG results that is just trash and it's getting in the way, eventually you're going to get into the habit of just naturally clicking the button that filters out AI. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see whether that is the direction it goes in. But I kind of suspect that it will, just based on the habits of fan fiction readers the world over.
Just for clarification, with DriveThruRPG, they do allow AI-assisted content on their platform, obviously. However, they don't accept standalone artwork products that are entirely AI-generated. Some of the best products, actually, on DriveThruRPG and DM's Guild, I believe, as well, are like those catalog of artwork from, I believe, previous D&D editions that you can purchase through DriveThruRPG to then include in anything that you create to then publish on DriveThruRPG or DM's Guild. And it's a good resource. It's generic-ish artwork. It's not commissioned for purpose, so it's not maybe exactly what's in your adventure, but it can help first-time publishers that are doing I wrote 4 pages on, a cluster of new magic items. Here's this image of a sword that I got from one of these licensed packs. I think it's good to know that you're not going to get one of those and everything in it is just AI generated because it's not allowed via the platform's rules. And that they do not allow either commercial products majoritively written by AI language models. Not to get into, because we talk about AI, it feels like every third or fourth week, but are we happier with these sorts of policies as opposed to a blanket, just no AI anywhere feel to it?
I am not against get rid of generative AI, but this is a good
particularly
first step
on a platform where you're selling stuff, but it's a great step.
Yeah, I'm not anti-AI all over the place if you can use it for a good purpose and you can bring down the resources that it uses. But for things that are generated for fun and art, I think more than happy to get rid of it.
Can't have that conversation without opening the whole can of worms again. So we won't. We'll put that can back on the shelf behind us and pull off, what's this other can that I have here? Critical Role and Dimension 20, both going on tour in 2025. We were talking about this a little bit in previous episodes where Dimension 20, I believe, was at Madison Square Garden, one of the biggest arenas in New York City. Had somebody, is it 50,000 people or something like that? The
is it one of the biggest?
size.
It's certainly one of the most famous. Shawn, is it one of the biggest?
It is a large arena. Yes, it's not the size of a football or soccer stadium.
Right. It's an
arena of good size where you will have concerts, large sporting events, etc.
Also, where Godzilla laid her eggs in the 2000 or 1999 movie starring Matthew Broderick. So, fun fact.
Okay, but was it at that Madison Square Garden or was it at a previous Madison Square Garden? Because I learned last time this was a thing. There have been multiple Madison Square Gardens.
How can you have multiple Madison Square Gardens?
Because
Shawn, represent your nation and explain yourself.
All I know is that Madison Square Garden sets atop Penn Station, which is one of the busiest train stations that in New York.
That's how they got in with the Frenchman in Godzilla.
Apparently.
Okay, cool. The deep Godzilla lore that we're getting this episode.
Your favorite Godzilla lore podcast in all the realms.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm talking about it. I don't even like the movie very much.
But anyway, speaking of things that are also fine, Critical Role apparently, they are doing a world tour in 2025, which includes Chicago, Indianapolis during Gen Con, New York City, and in June next year, as some people in chat are already excitedly talking about, they are coming to Australia with shows in Sydney on June 18th, which has already sold out, and I think it's only been on sale for about a week. And in Teos's words, Melbourne on June 25th, which I don't know the status of whether that one sold out or not. But Pat's saying that they're coming for the Melbourne show. I think I saw Roman saying they were going to the Sydney show, so... I know Luna
missed out.
has tickets for the Sydney show, I believe. You missed out. I mean, you could still get the Melbourne show. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't want to go to Melbourne. It's cold there.
In June, it will be cold. Pat's saying it sold out in like an hour. Melbourne still has a few cheap seats left in Melbourne. If you're listening to this live, go grab them because they'll probably be gone by the time this goes up on YouTube. But also concurrently to that, Dimension 20 also touring next year, doing, as mentioned, Madison Square Garden, Hollywood Bowl, Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, I believe, and the MGM Grand Garden Arena throughout several dates. I don't have all the dates in front of me, so this is not that useful as a news article. But, there you go. Side note, has anybody been watching Legends of Vox Machina?
I haven't, but I have been hearing certain things that had me very bewildered. I had a whole spoilerful conversation with a friend at a party the other night where they explained to me what was going on. They've made some pretty dramatic changes to the campaign storyline, which I think is a bold and also good move.
I'm sure I'll watch it right after I play Dragon Age Veilguard.
Yeah, we await.
Well, it's interesting because the other thing that reminded me of this, full disclosure, listening to the actual journalistic podcast, Mastering Dungeons, Legends of Vox Machina has been renewed for a 4th season. And some talk on that podcast between Teos and Shawn about, the popularity of something that started as a D&D show and has found success in the mainstream, or maybe D&D is mainstream now, was the pontification over on Mastering Dungeons. And I would hazard to guess, I think Legends of Vox Machina, kind of in a similar way to Baldur's Gate, Baldur's Gate 3 specifically, I suppose, although the originals as well, has definitely kind of broken the chains of being associated with D&D that strongly, because nothing about the show screams Dungeons and Dragons unless you know. You know what I mean? Like, if you know, you know. But if you don't know, it could be the He-Man animated series. It could be like a different vibe Castlevania style animated series. And no one that I talk to in the D&D sphere is particularly like clamoring over themselves to see it. So the popularity of this show, just anecdotally kind of, conjecturing here a little bit, must be based on its success in the mainstream in some capacity. I don't know. Chat, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if you've all been, falling over yourselves to watch it.
I think the word mainstream can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Having something up on Netflix does not make it mainstream. Having a show be watched in an arena does not make it mainstream. Mainstream is, you're watching it on a network television without having to pay cable, and, 50 million people are watching it, right? American football in the US is mainstream. Whether you like it or not, it affects, people's lives. So there's mainstream and then there's mainstream. So people would say as soon as the Drizzt novels were published, D&D became mainstream, because now these mass market paperback books that you could buy in any of your bookstores are available for everyone to see. But that wasn't really mainstream. Reader's Digest was mainstream. Like Time magazine was mainstream. And then as you get video games coming out that take the gaming community by storm, it's mainstream for the video game community, But at the time when they first came out, the gaming community wasn't mainstream. Now we're getting to the point where video games are mainstream. But even within that, there are segments, right? There's the Candy Crush gamers. Then there's you know where I'm going with this. So I'll step back.
No, I mean 100%, you know, and we are certainly in the West rocketing towards a culture that is no longer concerned so much with what is a household name, right? And it's a slightly different, but certainly adjacent thing, the idea of household things, right? Like in terms of a celebrity who you can be pretty sure you go into any household, you say Brad Pitt, someone's going to know who Brad Pitt is, right? We are potentially already in a space in our culture where the biggest celebrities on the planet, they've got millions and millions of followers, but that you go into a random household, you're not guaranteed that anyone's going to know who Chappell Roan is, who I don't know, I'm trying to think of any current actor. We're potentially beyond the last generation of like true quote unquote celebrity, right? Because, you know, you think about TikTok and the way that that people talk about it, just the way that language has developed around TikTok. You say, oh, I'm on Book Talk, I'm on Frog Talk, I'm on, I don't know, whatever your particular branch, because your feed is catered differently. You end up with these different kind of pockets of culture. And so we do end up with a thing where it's like Shawn is saying, you can have your D&D books, movies, TV shows. And even if everyone who loves that thing knows it's a D&D thing and it, you know, millions and millions and millions of people, it still doesn't necessarily make it what we used to think of as the mainstream. I think the definition of mainstream is shifting quite drastically. And it'll be interesting to see where or if it lands. And then the other thing to consider is that when we're talking about the success of a streamed show, and, you know, clearly Legends of Vox Machina is successful enough to keep getting renewed, but you have to think about what is Amazon Prime. That's who hosts it, right? What is whatever streaming platform considering success? And for a lot of streaming platforms, you know, because on YouTube, which is a streaming platform, it might be views. But on Netflix, it's usually how many conversions, how many new subscribers do we get? A streaming platform might think, how many subscribers are we keeping versus losing? You know, it's all these different things that, you know, maybe not a huge number of people are watching this thing, but we get a new wave of people subscribing every time a new season comes out. Those sorts of things are definite possibilities when we're talking about measuring success of a streamed show like this.
When the D&D movie premiered, I said to Teos, I think, it's too bad that the Mario movie is coming out next weekend, premiering the following weekend, because it's going to absolutely crush the D&D movie. And he's like, no, it won't. No, the D&D movie is going to be just as big as, and I'm like, that's mainstream versus not mainstream.
Yeah.
To avoid throwing Teos under the bus, I think this was a conversation you and I were having. And I was like, okay. Mario, come off it.
Oh, okay. There you go. Well,
but I just, you know, it's the thing about certainly in Australia, right? Like Mario came out as school holidays hit. And suddenly you've got all these parents going, we have to get something to get just a couple of hours of quiet. What are we going to do? We're going to go out and watch a movie. What's on at the movies? Suzume, which is a Japanese subtitled kind of tragedy. We've got D&D, which they probably are like, I've heard of D&D, but I never really played. Or Mario. Let's go with the safe bet, Mario. Or they've already been to the movie, so we're going to go see Mario because we've already been and seen the D. You know what I mean? So Mario was always going to completely crush.
Yes, all right, hindsight.
And so is foresight if you're smart.
I think you're... yeah, okay, touche. That took me a second, thus proving the point. I think you're right in what you were saying, Dael, is that we're certainly seeing a fracturing of what the mainstream is in terms of, like, you just think about the sheer number of channels that were on TV in the 80s and 90s, right? And there was, I don't know, 5 of them, maybe. I'm not sure. Depends on where you were living. Whereas now there's like 5 streaming services plus however many, for more than 5, like there's probably 20 streaming services, how many free-to-air kind of things that are still in your region, plus YouTube, plus TikTok, fractured into all of their individual channels, plus a podcast such as, all of these things.
Plus how much someone can afford. If you can only afford 3 of those streaming services, you're going to be in another different sphere to what other people are in,
Absolutely. And so just the maths just doesn't add up that any individual program would be able to pull the sort of audience that a TV show like Lost did back in its day, because what else are you going to watch? If you're into that sort of scripted television, whereas now people have so many more options, all of those caveats being taken into account, I think that I would assume relatively safely that Vox Machina is probably getting the number of views in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands per episode for Amazon to consider the time and money investment worthwhile, especially considering how quickly these series get cancelled and renewed again, or not renewed, I should say, by the streaming platforms, or just disappeared entirely off of the platform. It is certainly reaching a level of success, I would suspect, beyond just the sphere of fans in the tabletop RPG space. I would assume it's probably reaching more people than any individual YouTube channel. At a complete guess.
Except this one.
Except the number one tabletop RPG podcast YouTube channel in all the realms. It can be if you like and subscribe. Do it down below.
I wish I could see the views on that. You know how they were doing the, hey, you can go and watch the previous seasons for free in the lead up to the next season, that thing that they did.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I could see the view counts on that.
No, that would all be hidden away now, but you're right. Speaking of interesting things and things that we've talked about previously on this podcast, Ravenloft, Heir of Strahd is the name of the Ravenloft novel we mentioned a couple of episodes back that was being produced and published by Penguin Random House. Ravenloft, Heir of Strahd is being written by Delilah S. Dawson, features a party of adventurers going up against Strahd, reading the blurb. It sounds like Curse of Strahd novelized.
Question. When was the last time you read a novel?
I'm reading several of them right now.
Awesome.
Well, not at the same time. But
no, I was going to say, you should probably do the podcast, Ben. Pay attention.
I don't know the answer to that question, Shawn. Last year.
That answers the question. Yeah, I will sit down and start 7 novels, and I will get about 10 pages in, and then until I find one that really, really catches my eye. This is something different. This is something new.
To be fair, though,
I love reading, and
I'm skewing the results of this particular, podcast host survey because I'm just not a big reader. I know many people who devour novels constantly. I'm just not one of them. I like to say I'm well read. I'm not well reading.
That's not a judgment. It was honestly a curiosity. How about listening to them?
If I drove longer distances, I'm sure I would, but I do not, and so I do not.
What about tearing out the pages and eating them?
How about a drive down to Melbourne on your way to see...
Well, actually, Ben, I've said before I'm not a big podcast listener. The drive down to Melbourne, I got all my podcasts in.
I don't devour books literally either, Shawn. I was not a big reader either. I read a lot as a kid and then didn't read, or read very rarely, only novels that would really capture me, like World War Z, I think is up there somewhere. I started reading more recently because I was having trouble sleeping. And so reading before bed is something that kind of helps me just, slow down my brain and stop thinking. Kelly, I think, said this on like the 9th episode of the Lorecast ever about how reading is great for game designers and dungeon masters. Again, not a judgment call. I don't mean to give anybody anxiety of like, am I reading enough? But it is great because it increases your vocabulary in theory and also allows you to kind of engage with your influences a little bit. What I'm reading at the moment are the Saxon Chronicles, which the TV show The Last Kingdom is based upon. And you will see Last Kingdomisms, I suspect, in, the future of my work because there's aspects of it that I'm like, yes, that's great. That feels, what I really like about The Last Kingdom as a series is, as I think George R.R. Martin reviewed the series, it brings history to life. And it feels very much like that. Whether the novels are strictly historically accurate, and they're not, they're kind of historically accurate in the same way that an Assassin's Creed game is. It still gives you like a real window of like being on the ground in England during the Viking Age, during the reign of Alfred the Great. And so bringing that vibe into a D&D world setting, like it is an old and ancient place, and many cultures have influenced it up until this point, and many cultures will influence it as it continues to evolve, is something that I think is worth doing for people as game designers or whatever. Is finding things you like and reading your influences and letting them kind of influence you, and picking out things you like about them. The next thing I want to read is some Warhammer, Monster Hunter, like Witch Hunter, Heroes of Sigmar kind of stuff.
That's what's interesting to me about D&D novels specifically, is that I devoured them growing up. And as soon as I became a designer, I didn't want to read them anymore. I wanted to read other things. And so that's why seeing D&D novels always makes me interested who is reading them at this point in our culture.
I think, and we pontificated upon this when we talked about this novel last time, knowing less about what it was and kind of wondering what it would be and who it is for. And seeing that it is Curse of Strahd, the novel, I think a lot of, kids certainly, but I think adults as well, I know I do this for a fact, read a thing, engage in a story, and then they want to recreate that story for whatever reason, to feel like you're going from like your hands are on it to being elbow deep in it. An example of this I can give you was when I was like 20, I watched all of Dragon Ball Z from the start of Raditz all the way through to the end of the Buu saga. And then I just had to get a Dragon Ball Z fighting game because I needed the action figures to smash against each other, because I needed to keep immersing myself in that world. And I think this novel, being a Curse of Strahd, the novelization, is maybe in some sense targeted towards people who are like, oh, okay, that was a cool novel. I think I want to play D&D. I think I want to immerse myself in this more. Well, here's Curse of Strahd, the module. Maybe I'll play this, and this will give me the same feelings I got reading this book, but more immersed in it because I'm actually telling the story now, as opposed to just reading the story.
And then they'll play Death House, and all the characters will be dead.
Well, I think this might start with Death House. I don't know. The blurb says like these adventurers arrive in Barovia. They wake up there. They're kind of like, oh, this is a strange place. And then they get an invitation from Strahd to a mansion. But all things are not as they seem in Strahd's castle. So it's not, it says mansion, not castle. It's not really clear whether they're going to the Death House or whether they're going to like Castle Ravenloft at the start of the story. But hey, read the novel when it comes out next June and you can find out. Oh, okay. All right. This snuck past me and I had to pull it back because this happened like a week or two ago, but it snuck past me. Scions of Elemental Evil is an adventure that is free on D&D Beyond. It's probably free if you're subscribed to some tier of the subscription. But you can sign up to it. Adventure, one-shot kind of thing, has designed for 6 fourth level characters. You can use the D&D cartoon cast and Nico, provided as pre-generated characters. If you want to use those instead of creating your own characters, great introductory. The real news here is that it showcases some more monsters from the 2024 Monster Manual and some of their new features, including, I think, notably the Incubus and Succubus, who now have 2 different stat blocks. They have the ability to turn into each other during a long rest. So a succubus can become an incubus and vice versa. And their features are just way more metal than the previous version of the incubus and succubus. And this just generally gives me a lot more hope for what the new Monster Manual is going to look like in terms of the features of the monsters in there. Because like the incubus can now touch a dude and cause psychic damage. And if somebody's like below 20 hit points, they can sing a song or something and it just will put them unconscious. The succubus gets the draining kiss ability and can shapeshift to look like anybody. They both get access to different spells. I don't know. This just felt very like with old stat blocks from the 2014 Monster Manual, things like the Dryad and the Incubus Succubus and those sort of monsters just felt a little bit, because they were low CR. They couldn't really do a lot. I think the Dryad had like a club and it was like, cool. But there was nothing about it that felt particularly nature-y.
Yeah, and there was also frequently, rather than there was an aversion to giving a specific monster specific abilities, if that makes sense. This is me reading into it, but you look at the Monster Manual and they're trying to kind of, consolidate everything. So you don't tend to get abilities that don't also show up somewhere else on some other monster. And I completely understand that instinct, but also it really drained a lot of the flavor out of monsters. Whereas this is like, ooh, it's got oomph, it's got juice, it's got flavor. And even the pirate captain has, specific, it's not, you don't have to be some magic beastie. It's like, no, you are a pirate. And so we're going to give you some cool pirate flavored stuff. I love that.
Mm-hmm. I love the fact that there's Tough Boss is one of the monsters. As an action, they make you work the weekend. That's tough. That's a tough boss.
Was that actually an action? Did I not read that?
No, I'm joking.
It's a funny joke about tough bosses.
That's a good joke.
Obviously. Yes, let me explain my joke to you.
Well, because I also noted that the stat block called Tough Boss, and I was just kind of like, what is this meant to be? Like, is this just an elemental, like, throw this in when you need a tough boss? Or is this like a specific character to this adventure?
I think it's like a tough, like a street tough.
But why a boss? Yeah. Like just colloquially, man, that dude's a boss. He's a tough boss.
Yes.
Gotcha.
That's what I assume. I actually could be completely wrong.
No, that we're getting to my joke. It's taking a while, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I love that the pirate stat block has the abilities called Enthralling Panache, and it's just like an action you can try to charm a party member with your piratey charisma, which feels very cool.
Oh yeah.
And then the pirate captain has a similar ability called Captain's Charm, but it's a bonus action instead of an action. Gives me hope for when I can finally see inside of the monster manual. I found an article. This was published only like a few days ago, but I don't know if this is new information because this article was like new information about the monster manual, and then it didn't link to where it was drawing this new information from. So this could be new or old information. I'm not entirely sure, but plus 75 new monsters in this monster manual, bringing the total over 500 in the book. 9 high-level monsters. I feel like we've heard of some of this before in terms of like the epic tier hag, I think they've talked about, and the epic tier ooze, the Tarrasque ooze, and things like that. 40 humanoid stat blocks, which I really love, me as a dark fantasy connoisseur, the humanoid stat blocks that can flesh out the city streets and things without making the world feel too magical. The one hope I have about this new monster manual while we're on the topic, and I wonder if the two of you will agree with me, I want those humanoid stat blocks to be grouped together, like they at the back of the book or somewhere like they were in the 2014 monster manual, because then you know where they all are. You can go there and look at it. It's like a monster manual for humanoids instead of the Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse solution, which just had them alphabetically scattered throughout the whole book, which resulted in a lot of flicking back and forth to finding.
Because I don't know what you called this specific humanoid. I don't know you called them a tough boss.
Exactly that.
It's like when you're organizing your DVDs alphabetically. Everyone can relate. And you put all your Shakespeares together because it's like, look, maybe I'm looking for Much Ado About Nothing, but I'll remember it's in Shakespeare.
You have your own sorting system. Speaking of sorting systems, we sorted all the Grimhollow fans into those that supported the Kickstarter. Anyway, this is a really bad segue, but all I wanted to say is the Grimhollow Kickstarter finished last week, and I just want to say a quick thank you. We ended up with $890,000 in funding, and that funding has gone up in late pledges since. So you can still late pledge if you want to. I will copy the link over to the chat for people who are interested, who want to take a look at what's there. We unlocked a whole bunch of stretch goals. Honestly, this is not an ad as much as just to say thank you for folks that pledged. It means a lot to Shawn and I and the rest of the Ghostfire team. And speaking of the rest of the Ghostfire team, David is not on that team because he is an email listener who emailed podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. This is actually a redux of a question from an earlier episode that we did live at GameholeCon. But I feel like the specifics of this question might have got lost a little bit in trying to ask it quickly at the end of the panel. David's question was, what are some yellow/red flags in characters that DMs can push back on with players in-game? And the misunderstanding, I think, being at GameholeCon, asking what are the red flags in players? This is not about players, I don't think this question is. It's more about, like, you might have a perfectly great player who's one of your close friends, but what's something that they have presented in a character that you would be like, maybe not.
Right, like when a character shows up and it's the broody works alone rogue, or the bard who has a name like Snagglebum. I get what we're talking about. All right.
I think Dael just answered. For me, the red flags are more in terms of the power of the character in the context of the entire party and the entire campaign. So if I see a character and that player has a build for that character, as soon as I hear the word build, I'm like, oh. And if they have that character built from level 1 to 20 before the campaign starts, that's a huge red flag for me. If you do it, I don't hate you. I appreciate all sorts of players. But for me as a game master, that just tells me that there is something going on with that character other than the story that we're telling together. And if the build gets in the way of this story that we're telling together, it's detracting from the story that we're telling together. So it's not a red flag. I would just call it a yellow flag for me.
See, I feel like I keep coming back and banging this same drum. But I feel like at least in online spaces, the concept of session zero has moved so far in the direction of safety tools, which are good and important to go through during a session zero, that we forget the other things that a session zero is for. And so for me, a lot of what session zero is about is having your players come with their build, their super build that they saw online that they want to use. They come with their super role play heavy build where they're like, yes, I am a fighter, but I did tank both dex and strength. You know, they come with their loner rogue. They come with their, clearly a comedy character. I'm playing a sentient lettuce or whatever. And you use your session zero to figure out the lay of the land in that regard, right? Because all of those characters are fine contextually. There is nothing wrong with those characters contextually. If you are playing a campaign that is comedy, then your sentient lettuce is fine. If you're playing a one-shot, it doesn't matter that you're playing a sentient lettuce, or if you're, playing something that is heavily tactical, it's not going to be a problem that someone brings something that is a super build. It's about matching the expectations. And it's always about matching the expectations. So for me, it's always going to be a yellow flag more than a red flag, because it's about aligning what this game is with what the player wants to do. Because often, in my experience, a player will get that and will be like, oh, well, here's a different kind of character that I also would be happy to play that fits this campaign more. Or if a player doesn't vibe with that campaign style, they can save this character for another campaign that's going to match them better. And you can just, I always remind people, hey, if you don't want to play in this campaign, it's not like I'm not going to invite you to the next one. I'm going to keep in mind what kind of thing you want to play, and I'm going to, run another game another time, and it's going to be okay. So it's a lot of that kind of, aligning of expectations, and also chatting with the players to figure out why they want to play that character. What is it that you want out of this character? Can we find a middle ground? So as always, it is just about talking, making time to talk, asking lots of questions.
The sentient lettuce, can I play that and have its last name be Prey? So what Dael said is so on target, and it's not just with power. It's not just with, you'll get it in a minute, Ben. Just hang in there.
Nah, I don't think I will.
The problem with most campaigns is not power level, it's power imbalance. It's not play styles, it's an imbalance in play styles. The delta, that change between what one player has and what another player has, is what will ruin a campaign as quickly as anything. And it's not about one play style over another. It's just about that difference that you have to watch out for. And it will sneak up on you because you'll say, that's a little out there, but it's okay. And that's a little out there, but it's okay. But together, it's not okay. And we're dealing with this now when I'm thinking a lot about organized play, because organized play campaigns die because there's an imbalance with the amount of players that you bring into it. It puts up barriers for players to come in, and you'll always, whether it's an organized play campaign or your home campaign, you've got to be aware of that delta, that difference between strengths or play styles or everything that Dael already mentioned. Let us pray, Ben. Let us pray.
Let us pray. It's a cleric. The sentient lettuce is a cleric.
Got it. Yeah. All right.
Gotcha.
I'm there.
Yeah.
That took me a while. Anyway, yes, I agree with a lot of the, what you've said. Session 0 is finding out why different people want to play the game. Something that I hadn't really conceived of before. I mean, Shawn, I agree with you that I guess it's a yellow flag. I never quantified it that way before, but I get apprehensive when someone comes to me with a build. I've got a specific player, especially, who likes to find not even necessarily optimum builds, but just fun builds. Typified by the grappler who basically just wants to lock down the dragon on the ground and wail on it, or just keep it held down while everybody else wails on it. And when they come to me with a specific concept, I do get a little bit apprehensive because is it going to trivialize combat? Is it going to make combat fun for me as the GM to run if I'm just like, okay, I'm grappled, restrained, we'll have advantage, have fun? I think what I've kind of come to in this conversation from what Dael was saying around Session 0 is I'm often very focused on and wary of players who come in with Iggle Biggle, the Smiggle goblin or something, that's not going to fit the tone of the sort of campaign that I typically enjoy running. Yeah, anything with ears, basically, that aren't on the side of their head. And so I don't think about Session 0ing with builds as much because I'm so focused on the narrative side of things. But I think the conversation to have with players who come in with a specific build is, again, what you both said. Why do you want to play this? What is this build intended to do? Because I think that's why some players come in is they're like, oh, I've got this build. You're not going to see this coming. And I'm like, no, as the GM, I want to see this coming. Mm-hmm. I want to know what you want this build to do because I want to be able to facilitate for that build to do what you want it to be able to do. And I also want to know how to circumvent it when I want to so that I can provide a challenge to you and the rest of the party on different occasions, And if you don't know as the GM what it's kind of that thing where the player wants to make a deception check, but they deceive you, the game master. And if I had realized what you were trying to do, I might have gotten you to roll a deception check instead because you fooled me, Ben, but you didn't necessarily fool, Dracus, the master investigator who's investigating you.
And also because
and
as
similar
the DM,
in combat.
I know that there are really sort of conflict joyous GMs out there. I got to indulge in that a little bit while running a game of Dread recently. But mostly if you want to do a thing, the DM wants to help you do the cool thing. You know what I mean? So having that communication enables, like you said, challenging that character at times as well as indulging that character at times. Ideally, a DM is trying to get that balance so that the story feels exciting and fun for you.
Yes, I agree. I mean, bringing it back to the video game conversation we were having at the start, video games will introduce different types of enemies that different builds of characters enjoy playing against and don't enjoy playing against. You know what I mean? In a Gears of War or a Mass Effect game, the goal is to, just aging myself a little bit here, the goal is to get behind cover and shoot out from behind cover. And sometimes that's really fun to do. But what also keeps the game fun and challenging is when they send the little skittery dudes that blow up or the powered monsters that can just walk up on you and don't care about being shot to force you out of cover to go find somewhere else to take cover or whatever. It allows you to both indulge in your power fantasy and challenges that power fantasy at the same time. And so, in terms of distilling this into a single point, the yellow flag is players that come with builds, and the answer is talking with that player to figure out what the build is meant to do so that you can facilitate their fun as well as the fun of everybody else at the table.
We solved it.
We did it.
Well done, gang.
We've
Hands
solved
in.
it. Yeah. Hands in, everyone. Hands in. We did it. Yay. Cool. Well, speaking of hands, you can give this podcast a thumbs up by clicking the hand-shaped symbol below with the thumb that is upwards. If you're on Spotify or somewhere, there aren't hand-shaped symbols, unfortunately, but there are stars, so you can click the furthest along one of those. If you're in some other pod-catching app, you can do something there too, I'm sure. You can comment on Spotify. Spotify's changed how the comment section works, I assume, because we've been getting a lot more comments. We ran out of time. I was going to pull a Spotify question, but I'll pull it for next week. I thought we were going to slam through the news quicker than that. I apologize, but we will get to more questions. I know people have been asking for more questions. We did it again. My fault. We probably didn't need the Funko Pop section. Anyway, we'll be back next week. If you want to join us live and find all the bits that you didn't see because Dante cut them out, like the Funko Pop section, you can come catch us live 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on a Monday. It is Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time Australian, if you want to catch us. And otherwise, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're in all the places, likes, stars, things, comments, all of that is good. My name's Ben Byrne. I've been here with Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill. We'll be back next week. Until then, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
To prove your point from like an hour ago, Dael, I am barely aware of who... Oh, now I'm going to get it wrong. Chapel Rowan?
Chapel Rowan.
Yeah, I have no idea who that is, but I have started to hear that name kind of float around, and I'm like, oh, I feel like I should know who this person is.
Yeah.
Did they host SNL this week?